much talking. That's what I'm doing.
You're all ready, we'll get started.
Cool. Should I go ahead? Oh, okay. So hello, my name is Jamie Mosher. I think I've met both of you guys. It's a real honor to be asked to speak today because I've not been asked to do this kind of thing before. I wrote a piece for the New Organ, and I was asked to speak about it. Oh yeah, just so I know, how many people did go to the concert and see Grant play, or watched it online?
I watched it online.
Oh no, I don't mean the actual number. Like, did you guys go, or so half and half? Yeah. Well, good. So now I know how to kind of gear what I'm saying. But yeah, so instead of just talk about the piece, I thought I would, because even I get bored listening to myself talk about myself anyway. So I thought it'd be fun to go through the things that music composers do in general to create an interesting experience for the listener. Now, I'm still very much a student of composing music. By day, I'm a pediatrician, and to keep myself out of trouble at night, I either write music or learn more about writing music. Is that Ryan? No, okay, wrong. So I really enjoy learning about this, and this is a topic that I find absolutely fascinating. How composers take little snippets of notes and just manipulate them in ways to make a large, 10-minute symphony movement or something. So what we're going to hear today is, again, like I said, since I'm still a student, one of the funniest lessons I've learned comes from Igor Stravinsky, who is a famous composer of the 20th century. And this line comes right from him. Good composers borrow, great ones steal, meaning steal ideas from each other. I figured since this is an issues class in a church, it might be nice to say it in a biblical fashion. We all know this quote, that there's basically nothing new under the sun. All the techniques I'm going to talk about today have been used since the time of Bach, if not prior to that. But like I said, I just find this stuff really fascinating. So my hope is that as we go through this stuff, I'll not only point out how I used these techniques in the piece I wrote, but make it a broader learning experience for you. So when you go and you're listening to music sometime, maybe you'll say, oh yeah, I see that person did that thing that guy talked about. So let's see. Oh yeah, I wanted to stop for questions. Any questions yet? Feel free to interrupt me, because again, I want this to be something you all learn from and not just me babbling and geeking out about, about my favorite hobby. So where it all begins is a musical motive. This isn't the only way to write a piece, but it's a method that's been used quite a bit through most of history, so that's why I'm going to talk about it. And a musical motive is just a short series of notes, kind of like a building block. I think of them as either molecules or Legos, because you take a Lego and you get different colored ones, or different numbers of pegs on them, and you can build a masterpiece out of just a little building block. So you can do the same thing with music. The most famous, so that's my definition of a motive. Arnold Schoenberg is a famous composer and music educator, again from the 20th century. My daughter says this was a lot more complicated in explanation, but his is more learned, so I figured I'd share it with you. A recognizable unit which contains one or more features of an interval or rhythm, and the presence is maintained throughout a piece, and you basically hear it over and over again. The point is that so that your listener has something to latch onto. So you hear, so the most famous motive, I think, in music history is, we all know that one, right? And you know that piece goes on to hear that same rhythmic and pitch motive a billion different times in a lot of different fashions. So again, this was more my definition of a motive. Yeah, so motives started off as just a compositional building block, like a Lego. But as time went on, people started using motives for more than just a musical building block. Wagner is famous for using musical motives to represent characters or themes or articles of importance in his operas. And then, of course, film composers just took that and ran with it. And again, I think the most famous movie motive is, right? We all hear that. All you need is 2 notes and you got a villain, in the words of Jack Black from the movie The Holiday. So now what do we, you can't just do and have an entire piece. You have to do something with the motive. So there are a bunch of different things you can do with it. One of the first things, even if you're kind of whistling your own little motive on your own, is it's kind of natural to move that up or down. So, for example, Beethoven goes, and then he moves it down, right? So that's one thing you can do. Fancy word for that is sequencing. I just think of it as moving it up or down. Another thing you can do is flip it upside down. So, for example, later on in that, in the Fifth Symphony, he goes, and then you hear, but this whole part where he goes, that's just upside down of the part. So that's another trick people have used forever. And then we have, then you can play your motive backwards, which that takes a little bit of thought. There are people out there who can take, an 8-note motive and be able to immediately play it backwards. I'm not one of those people. I have to map it out, as you'll see moving forward here. And then there's the really fancy upside down and backwards version of a motive, which, there are famous examples of that, but those, other than to the most trained ear, you wouldn't even know as a listener that that's what's going on. But again, it's kind of a way that composers can change something just enough to make more material to then make their piece longer. Again, if you're building a 10-minute symphony, you can't do it out of 3 notes. It was played the same way every time. Let's see. Oh yeah, so another trick you can play is to widen the gaps between the notes. So instead of going, or you can go, kind of like he does later on that first movement. That's just taking this motive, that interval, and making it bigger. And then, so that's kind of a cool trick. And then finally, you can either lengthen or narrow your note values. So the example I think of this is at the end of a song, like for example, the Grand Old Flag. Keep your eye on the grand old flag is what you sing in the middle of the song. But then at the end, you get the big finale. Keep your eye on the grand old flag, right? You've now lengthened your note values to make it more interesting. Oh yeah, and then after you've done all that, you can take your motive and cut it into little pieces too. So instead of like a 16-peg Lego building block, now you've got an 8, and then a 4, and then a 2. And then you can do all the same things above with that. So you can see there's like a million possibilities out of just taking a few short notes. Okay, cool. So, any questions yet? That is a crash course in. I tried to make it quick so that we can get to the good stuff. Let's see. Oh, okay. So a lot of people ask me like, hey, where do musical ideas, where do motives come from? And the possibilities are kind of endless. The examples I've heard of through my interactions with other people or myself, one is you just walking or going throughout your daily life and some little melody comes into your head. That's probably the way most of them happen. But other ways would be, for example, take Elton John or anybody who's writing music based on someone's lyrics. Elton John would get lyrics from Bernie Taupin, look at the words, and pretty much, if you read poetry and it has a certain lilt to it, and that starts to help your rhythmic ideas, and then, you know, depending on what the song is saying, you may get, you know, a musical idea from there. There's composers who have made pieces based on a bird song, because, you know, bird tweets are just a few notes in a row, and so they'll kind of turn those into musical pitches and make a piece out of them. Sometimes, like I said, good composers borrow, great ones steal. Composers will steal a motive from somebody else. So a famous example is Beethoven stole at least two that I can think of from Mozart. Now, it's not like he used Mozart's piece and called it his own. He just took probably about 8 notes of a Mozart piece, and then from those 8 notes, and played them very recognizably so people know, hey, this is a Mozart piece, and then he goes off in a completely different direction and makes it his own piece. Now, another way people will do it, these are the fun, creative ways coming up here. One is called a numerical cryptogram, where you basically take your scale, there we go, and number each note. So, for example, in this one, you're hearing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you take numbers like, for example, I know people have written pieces out of a birthday. So you take someone's birthday and just take the numbers out and figure out what notes those are, and then you go from there. A very good friend of mine is a professional jazz pianist, and I saw him in concert once. Shout out to the audience, like, hey, I want 4 numbers between 1 and 8. And so someone's like, you know, 2, 7, 4, 3. And then he took those 4 pitches and just improvised for about 5 minutes, just using those 4 pitches and expanding it and making a piece. A very creative method use of one of these I've heard recently was this guy I follow on YouTube. His name's Anthony O'Toole, and he wrote a piece for Pi Day based on the number pi, and I wanted to share that, just part of it with you, just to show you kind of what you can do. And he was kind enough to put at the top of the piece, I don't know if you can see it, but can you see he's written the numbers of pi up here? Like 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 9, 2, 6, 5. So I was just going to play that first part with the numbers so you can kind of hear what one of these numerical cryptograms would sound like. I'll point out where we are. Here. Follow the bouncing ball. And then he repeats it. So I thought that was kind of cool. Now I go back to our presentation. Good. So any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have one.
Yeah.
I've always wondered, you were talking earlier about Bernie Taupin and Elton John. I was always wondering, what is the ratio of people that might create songs out of music first, or music after the lyrics were first presented?
Right.
Do you have a feel for which is usually done?
I don't, because for myself, I've done it both ways. And I don't know that anybody does it both ways exclusively. I think Elton John certainly primarily got the lyrics first and then wrote the music. But not having interviewed a whole ton of people about that, I'm not sure what percentage of people do one more than the other.
Which do you think is easier if you're making a song?
I think, so in my own personal experience, if the writer of the lyrics has a certain mood and message they're trying to put across, I find it easier to get the lyrics first, because from the lyrics I get a whole bunch of information that helps me focus in on what they want. So you get the mood, you get the rhythm, and you can get, like I was saying earlier, you can get some pitch ideas and how you want it to go. Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Lengthen motive. I mean, and it's probably because I have problems with focus. if the motive gets very long, I'm not gonna see it.
Right.
I'm not gonna see it at all. I mean, short ones like we've played, okay, I see it, I get them, once you get beyond a few, I'm in the weeds somewhere going, huh?
Yeah, yeah. Good question. The question from the audience is, does the length of the motive matter? And it does, very much so. There's a rule of thumb, I think even Arnold Schoenberg, the guy I quoted earlier on what is a motive, generally 3 to 5 notes is considered pretty good. If you're getting up over 6 or 7, you better have a good way of bringing it in so that your audience can recognize it. And as you'll see in up to 11, I went over. So I had to figure out how to make it memorable. So yeah, good. So that was a great question that helped me segue into up to 11. So another way of making finding a motive is using an alphabetical cryptogram, which is where you turn each letter of your spoken language into a musical pitch and use a name or what else have people used? Mainly names or initials of people to generate a motive. And there are numbers of ways to do this. And I didn't realize how many ways there were to do this until I started writing this piece and researching it. I knew I wanted to use Dan Stokes and Grant Wareham as my motive, at least inspiration. But the German method has just a different organization versus the French method, which I learned. I guess I used the French method. So, for example, you can see this is the method I used. Basically, I'm very literal. I'm a very concrete person. So, to me, the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, that should be a given, right? You don't have to do it that way, but for me, I felt like that should be a given. So then all I did was start over. H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, L, M, and N were just lined up under there, and then O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, and V, W, X, Y, Z. So that, for example, let's say for Dan Stokes' name, for example, D here, A here, N, since it's under this note, became this. And then you can see what S-T-O-K-E-S would look like that. Just as a further illustration, I wanted to show this Wikipedia page. They say never use Wikipedia in like something you want to be authoritative, right? Well, again, researching as much as I could, this Wikipedia article was the absolute best, well-done description of motives. All I want you to get from this page is the huge variety of published composers who a lot of people have heard of, what they did for their motives. Just the sheer number. The most famous being, if I can find it down here, Bach. If you see J.S. Bach used his own name in several compositions as a starting motive. But then, because he was so revered, so did many other composers after him use Bach's name. And then another one I think is pretty cool is Dimitri Sashtakovic. He used his own, this set of initials of his quite often in at least a couple of symphonies that I'm aware of and several of his string quartets. He kind of used it as his signature. He might not base the entire piece on the motive, but he'd work it in there somehow so that, either him or those in the know would know that was his piece. So let's see, going back here. So, yeah, so I started writing up to 11 back when Dan was the only music director we had, and he was doing so much work to get it there. And I'd always wanted to try this trick of writing a song. So I took Dan's name, and so literally this is what it sounds like. So D, A, N, S, T, O, K, E, S. So the first thing you do is you play this out and you kind of play it over and over and over and over and see, gosh, what can I do with this? How can this become a piece? So I found just knowing where these notes were lying out, I kind of felt like it would kind of circle around this chord. So, except that last note doesn't really fit with, maybe in an old jazz standard, but not to finalize a piece. So the first thing I did with this was to drop that last note down, just one little step. So it ended with. To me, that sounded a lot better. And then the rhythm I found myself using was this. So the rhythm I put to it was, oops, if I could play it right. And so then the longer I worked on it, I just found that just a couple more of the middle notes weren't quite fitting and sounding right. So I had to adjust just a couple more of them, and it wound up sounding like this. And I like that a lot better. Now, like I said, I'm a very concrete person. And so knowing that I couldn't get all of Dan's name completely into this scheme, it really bothered me for a while. But then somebody reminded me, like, hey, dude, when you're the creator of a work, it's your work. You can do what you want with it. And the person who inspired the motive, they're still there. It's not like you're taking away from their presence in the piece. So that was okay. And then the other thing that was okay was, do you guys all remember the song Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Ti Do? Well, that song came to the rescue because in the scale I was using, this final S here hit on so, do, re, mi, fa, so. And I'm like, all right, so begins with an S, so at least I can say like this final S is a Stokes. So I really am only messing with 3 of the notes. I think that's, yeah. So now we have a motive, all right? Now you're gonna take that somewhere, because you can't just, like I said, you can't just build a piece on one motive. So then I played with it like I was telling you those tricks earlier, upside down, backwards. The backwards one actually didn't sound too bad. Oops. Oh yeah, maybe it's waiting for me to do this. Ha-ha. All right. So that same motive backwards went. So still, again, in the same key. All right. So I was really excited about that. And then I think what I'm going to do now is shift over to the piece. How many of you guys were at the concert and have actually heard this piece? Oh, good. I'm hoping not to bore you too much with it. But just so we can see, I have to go to a different view here. How this fit into the piece. I typed in the names, or the letters. I'm going to get back to the beginning in a second, but you can see at the bottom what I just played for you. D-A-N-S-T-O-K-E-S, and then it went backwards. S-E-K-O-T-S-N-A-D. And then I had to take it somewhere else. And again, none of the upside down motives weren't working, stretching it out, shrinking it, stuff like that. So I just made up a line which I just want to identify as the brackets. If you can't read music, that's fine. Just know that every time you see the D-A-N-S-T-O-K-E-S, you're seeing the motive I came up with. And then if you see the brackets, which you're going to see later, that just indicates a line that I was able to kind of expand on the first motive with. So for example, this ascending part, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, that just comes from the backwards. I took a little snippet of the backwards version and kind of plugged it in there. So what I want to do is just start from the beginning. I'll just play the first part of this piece. Whoa, sorry, it's loud. So that's the first theme, again, just built on that one motive. And you might have noticed that the accompaniment here, how many of you guys read music? Because I don't want to speak as though you're reading music. A little bit, yeah, okay, cool. And I'm glad some of you don't, so I can explain it. You don't have to read music. You can just see that Dan Stokes is part of the accompaniment as well as the melody right here. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is at the end, to kind of transition into Grant's theme, which I'll get to, I used that that technique where the grand old flag, you make the note values longer. That's just what was happening here in order to slow things down. So now we get to Grant's theme. And now that I'm talking about themes, themes are basically like a section of a piece that, again, your ear recognizes, like, okay, yeah, I'm going to recognize that part. So I always call the first part Dan's theme. And the one way you build a piece is by figuring out, like, how are you going to arrange your big sections? So, for example, a popular song usually has a verse, then a chorus, then you go back to the verse, and then maybe a bridge or a chorus, and you throw that in there somewhere, and then you have a grand finale. But there's a certain order that you expect the recognizable but different parts of the piece to go. So this form I'm using in this one is, again, a form that's been used ever since at least the classical period where Mozart was writing, invented in the Baroque period. But you use two themes. So I had a Dan theme and a Grant theme. And your idea is to present these themes in a recognizable fashion, and then you repeat them. I'm not going to make us repeat them here because you'll get the point. And then we do stuff with them later on and then come back to it later. So since I knew I had two people, I wanted two themes. And I'm going to jump back to how we got Grant's theme, which is basically the same way that we got Dan's. Oh yeah, that's right, it's waiting on this. Good. So just playing the same trick with the alphabet like I showed you before, Grant's original theme sounds like. And again, if I'm using this as my chord, those final notes, again, like in Misty, that sounds good. in my church piece, that just didn't sound good. So the same trick I had to do for Dan's theme, we brought the last note up to sound like that, and then I shifted a couple more things around so that the final sounds like this. So I like that a lot better. And we got our second theme, which now we're going to back and listen to. Right, so we're picking up right where we left off, okay? We're getting right into that second theme I was describing. And then oh yeah, and I have to change the sound on it here. Here. Yeah. Certain parts just sound better with different sounds. So here. Now I'm going to stop there and say what I forgot to say back here. You can see you don't see a whole bunch of repetitions of Grant Wareham or backwards names or anything. Basically, his name founded a good first couple of measures, and then from there I just kind of wrote what came natural. Let's see, yep, here we go. And then this is our transition into the repeat, again, which I said we're not going to listen to, which I took Dan's last name, Stokes. There, and now we're back at the beginning. when I was practicing this with my wife and daughter last night, this is about where I started to lose them. So I want to pause, take a deep breath for me and you if needed, and ask, are there any questions that I can answer? And again, this is I'm meaning this talk to be more broadly applicable. I'm just showing you tricks that I was using to make motives, but again, I can comment on whatever you like. Sure.
I saw you at the concert last Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like jazz?
Do I like what?
Jazz.
Jazz. Yes, I love jazz. The question is, do I like jazz music? Yes, love it.
The reason I ask is you mentioned something earlier that a good jazz pianist can take 4 or 5 notes and just build on it.
Yeah.
And I talked to the composer last week,
Mm-hmm.
and I noticed on one of the pieces he had about 2 lines of notes, and he played for about 6 minutes.
Really?
And I'm sitting there, and
Yeah.
later he unfolded just about 7 pages of notes, and he was playing on that for about 4 minutes.
Oh.
So I asked him, because he said many of them just take a theme, and then the other guys they've been playing together so long, and he said it's based on trust. They just start playing.
Right.
And I heard you make that comment earlier, and I went, oh, that's how they do it. They have these themes, the other guys recognize them, and they just build on them.
Right. Right. Yep.
I just cannot, my mind won't do that.
Mine neither.
I just,
Right.
and this has been, to me, I missed a few minutes as we were coming here, but this is fascinating. I'll listen to this again. This is
Great.
very informative, to me at least.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so the comment just for the online audience was regarding jazz musicians who can do all of this manipulation basically on the spot. And yes, it amazes me. I've seen them do it, and my jaw drops every time. They will take a 5-note, 6-note motive, play it upside down, backwards, and just go to town with it. And yeah, it's amazing to watch. I, on the other hand, have to take very painstaking steps to play it for myself, look at it backwards and forwards and everything. So yeah, I think that just takes years of training and practice, you know. So yeah, and again, feel free to stop me. My plan moving forward was just to kind of show in the rest of the piece where the different manipulation processes that I used. It shouldn't take too much longer. And then, you know, you're free to interrupt me or ask questions about anything. So like I said, now we're back at the beginning of the piece, and the reason that this particular form calls for that is because the idea is for the themes to get really ingrained in your head so that you recognize them later on, because later on they're going to be taken apart and, you know, and manipulated upside down and backwards and stuff, and the hope is that you're going to recognize more of it. So I'm just going to skip through the repeat part, but you can see, you know, there's Dan Stokes, and there's his theme, and then we move forward, and here's Grant's theme again, and then the transition. So now now that both themes have been introduced, and again, hopefully very recognizably, we hit, in this particular form, what's called the development section. And that's where the composer takes their theme and their motives and presents them in just a very different light. So the comparison is to a play or an opera where you have, let's say you have 2 main characters, and what we just listened to up till now is the introduction. Like, yeah, hey, this is Sarah, and this is Jack. And, you know, Sarah's theme is light and happy. Jack's theme is rah, rah, rah. And so now we know the characters, we kind of know their personalities a bit. The development section is where these characters either interact or not. They might have their own monologues. And you might take like a very short snippet of one of their themes and do different things with it. So this is kind of a fun part. Now that you've introduced your themes, you can kind of play with them. So my development section just has two very distinguished, not distinguished, oh my gosh, very distinct sections. This first section, I derived the style, actually, of both sections based on pieces that I asked Grant and Dan, like, what are your favorite pieces? And so Grant gave me this particular piece by Franz Liszt. I'm just going to play a little bit of it for you, which is here. Turn it way up. And what I want you to listen for is how the melody is in the bottom, and it's a very long note melody. Whereas up in the top, you're going to hear the organ going beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop. And it kind of sounds like almost like an alien coming down to Earth. But I love the way that the accompaniment kind of ping-pongs around while the melody plays below it. So just listen to that for a second. And it's really quiet, so you're going to have to listen real carefully. Oh, we got a few seconds here. Let me skip ahead. There we go. Hear that? So can you hear that top part just kind of bouncing around while that melody just kind of floats underneath it? So I thought that was just such a cool effect that I was hoping to recreate that here. So what you're going to see, and my daughter told me to make sure I point this out to you. She's 12. So she wanted you all to know that this top part, these notes in the top part, represent the bouncing around part, the fast-moving part. And then the melody is down here below. Now remember I asked you earlier to recognize these brackets, okay? This bracketed part, I didn't even know I was doing this, honestly. This bracketed theme comes from back in the end of Dan's theme. And until I was putting this presentation together, I looked at it, I'm like, oh, that's where I got it. Okay, cool. So some of this stuff is really subconscious. But again, we'll just play this section, and then we'll talk about the next one. So you see, no brackets or letters. This is just playing. Now here's Dan's theme back. Okay, and we'll stop there. Don't worry if you're not hearing the themes. Again, I don't always hear this stuff in other people's music. That's why I put the letters on, just so you can recognize the motivic development patterns. And again, you'll see this in like the hymns you listen to or the pop songs you listen to. What makes it memorable is that there's a short, catchy series of notes that you kind of sing or and play over and over. Any questions before we hit the last part of the development? Okay, so the second part, I think it was Dan gave me a fugue that he liked a lot, and no organ concert, as you noticed last week, no organ concert or organist is complete without knowing a whole bunch of fugues. A fugue is a style popularized by Bach that one of the characteristics is that you hear a series of notes played and then danced around a bit, and then those series of notes come in again in a very specific order, and it sounds very regimented, because it is. It's a type of a format of composing that has very strict rules to it, and that's the most I'll get into it, because I even still don't understand all of it. But the thing I want you to hear, I'm going to play this fugue by Bach that was one of Dan's favorites. And what I want you to listen to is the series of notes that Bach uses is this. So that's his theme. You're going to hear that, and then he'll play with that a little bit, and then you'll hear it come in just a little bit higher a little bit later. And I'm not going to play this whole thing, by the way. You're just going to hear, a few seconds of it, just so you kind of get the idea of what a fugue starts to sound like. You hear it again? There's that deedle-deedle-deedle. Now he plays it a little bit. Now you'll hear it coming again down below in a second. There it is. Sorry, it was above. But do you hear that kind of coming in and then? So that's what fugues do. That's how they introduce the motive, and then they go on to kind of play with it from there. And by the way, this fugue was one of Dan's favorites. So this is the last fugue he played on the organ, the old organ, before it got taken down. So I figured I'd throw a fugue in here, and you'll see that part of it come back later. But so Grant's fugue, because this is Grant's theme, you can see that I couldn't fit all of his name in here. It just worked out. But hey, it's the spirit, right? You got most of it. So I guess what I'm going to point out before we just play all the way through it is we got Grant's theme, and then that comes in. And then over here, you'll hear it. It sounds a little bit different, but close enough, and it's because it's that upside down version where you take your motive and you flip it upside down. So let's just start there. There we go. Doot. So you can see the W-A-H. Just take a small snippet of the motive and use it again and again. And here's the upside down part. Okay, so you can tell the big finale is coming up, right? Like you can kind of feel it coming. The one thing before we get into the finale that I want to talk about is this little section here. We call these Easter eggs. Easter eggs are things that artists, and I assume it's not just music. I would assume if you're good at any art medium, be it a poem or a book or a visual art, you hide things in there for either the performer, the people who are really in the know to find. For example, Lin-Manuel Miranda in Hamilton hid a whole bunch of Easter eggs in there that I never would have picked up if I hadn't heard like 3 interviews with him talking about all the Easter eggs he hid in his musical. So this was an Easter egg I hid for whichever organist or organists would be playing this piece. Those notes are, which is the kind of the beginning of that fugue that I guess every organist learns from what I'm told. And so now we get into the grand finale, and I'm going to change the sound here. Now, with this particular form, the large-scale sections I was talking about, this is the part at the end. It's called the recapitulation. I just call it the grand finale. And this is where the composer brings back their 2 themes, usually sounding pretty much as they were presented, but different enough. And different enough, number 1, to be interesting, and number 2, kind of metaphorically, these two themes or characters were introduced at the beginning, and then in the development section like we just had, they went through an experience. They went through life. And now they're not the same person they were at the beginning. So you're hopefully going to hear them a little bit differently. And there's different ways to do that. Either be it by the chords you use, or the accompaniment, or if it's a symphony, different instruments that you put playing them. The technique I wanted to use, again, great composers steal. I'm aspiring to be a great composer, so I'm stealing as much as I can. Usually in a development section, or in the finale, you hear the two themes pretty much separate, but just altered in some way. I stole a trick from Gustav Holst, because I played in band when I was in high school, and we played a couple of his concert suites for bands, and each of those suites had a march in it. And in each march, he would introduce his two themes, but then at the end of the piece, he would smash both themes together at the same time, and you would hear both of them at the same time, but they were so beautifully woven that you just like, it is one of those experiences where the sum is greater than its parts. The two together just made such a beautiful sound. I think John Philip Sousa and his marches, like the end of the Stars and Stripes Forever, you get the da 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 da, and the piccolos are going, going crazy. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that I found really cool. So you're going to hear Dan's and Grant's themes together, and just this morning I figured out a way to play it so that you can actually tell the difference, because when I was practicing this last night with my family, they couldn't tell the difference. I need to go here and here and do this, and then here, and then this, and then here. So hopefully you'll hear Dan and Grant's themes together. So again, Dan's theme is, and then Grant's. So here we go, if this works right. Okay, I think you get the point. I'll put the rest of the instrument, the rest of it back in so we can kind of finish this off. Let's see, get rid of that, get rid of that. Here we go. Now this is my computer being dramatic. Just pauses way too long. All right, so that's how you make a 5.5-minute piece out of a couple of people's names. It's a lot of fun if you like that sort of thing. But good, we have time for questions. Any questions? Yeah.
How long did it take you to write this?
So, because I have a full-time day job, and I'm early in my abilities of doing this, we've been working on and off for the couple of years that it took to get the organ built. Most of it was probably, maybe a year and a half in the making. But the final part that was really a lot of fun was, you can see I had 2 sounds to work with on my computer. It was a lot of fun getting it finished and then giving it to Grant and and just Grant taking it and making a symphony out of it. Like he really knew what this new organ was capable of and the different sounds it was capable of making, and so he really sculpted the soundscape for it. So that was an on and off collaboration probably for the last 3 to 4 months. Yeah. Any online questions?
Nothing online.
Okay.
Another question I would have, this is not your primary occupation or so forth.
Thank goodness, I'd be starving if it was.
What background would you have or did you have to get to the point in music where you're at now?
Oh, okay, so I grew up, music's always been my main hobby. I grew up, started on piano and then played clarinet in the band. But my teacher, I credit my teacher that I had first, I started with him in first grade, and he had a master's in music composition as well as a master's in piano performance or music ed or something. But either way, so he would assign all of his students, after about a year or two of lessons, he would just give his students an assignment, go write a song. And I don't even know if he had any guidelines to it, but he gave me the assignment to write this piece, and I had a really good time doing it, and he said, oh gosh, you're pretty good at this. So I went on to kind of study with him, and then through high school and college and medical school, I didn't have a whole lot of time to pursue it any further. But then once my career and my family got settled, I had more time to start taking lessons. So I've been taking some private lessons and then reading as much as I can too. Just experimenting. That's where I get great quotes like, great composers steal.
So you play the organ?
I do not. Oh my gosh, no. I tried playing the organ at a music camp once. It's hard enough to have two hands going. Once I started putting the feet with it, oh my gosh, it was such a frustrating experience because just my brain does not work that quickly. Like I said, I have to kind of take my time and piece things apart. So yeah, I found the organ really frustrating. and that's no fault of the organ, that's the organist, which is why, I really marvel at people who can play with two hands and 2 feet at the same time. It's nuts. That's a kind of coordination. Whew.
Yeah, 2 hands, 2 feet, 3 or 4 keyboards.
Right.
Yeah, I get amazed at guys that can play this one here and this one here
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I learned by watching Grant do this was not only is he playing, but he also has to, like I said, he sculpted the soundscape. So he had, he knew all the sounds he wanted, and he had preset buttons for each of the settings. But still, he's trying to play, and in between the sections, hit buttons to change the sounds of the organ. What? Oh my gosh, yeah, it's crazy.
But isn't that one of the advantages of the computer, where you can write notes, let it play, and tweak it in combination of the different things without needing to do this jump up and down.
Yes, yeah.
And so that's one of the advantages the software provides.
Sure does. Yeah, the comment was about the software, and yes, the ability to hear it in its, in an instrument that's going to sound at least sort of close. Some of them sound better. The organ doesn't sound too bad on the software. Get a saxophone or a trumpet, and it sounds, kind of cheesy. But at least you get kind of, closer than Beethoven would have had. So, the next step I take in my mind is, gosh, what would have Mozart or Beethoven been able to do if they weren't writing everything by hand and could just cut and paste, especially with motivic writing like this, or Bach? Oh my gosh, you just cut, paste, flip it upside down. The computer will even flip it upside down for you and run it backwards for you and do all sorts of stuff. So, yeah, it's pretty... I just marvel. I mean, Mozart, he lived to be, 33 or something, and he wrote such a huge volume of stuff. I mean, imagine what he would have done with a computer. What would his output have been? Yeah. Well, thank you all for your kind attention. I appreciate it. Your interest. Thank you.
My mind was more.
Well, that's like what you were talking about.
Oh, good. I did have it on.
Yeah, that's good.
Should I turn it off now? or-
Yeah, you can turn it off now.
I just unplugged it, but
turn it off too.
Yeah, whether they
Thank you very
got this internal structure that he's talking
You do a
about.
lot with that,
built in,
that's great.
And so they play with it, very much like you see a kid play with a soccer ball, doing weird things with the soccer ball in between, matches. The creative process is involved in the violation of the rules that you establish. I mean, with him messing with the